잘 저장해 뒀습니다. Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please? In about a few minutes, we will start the fourth and final session of the CIET 2022. We will be looking at the current issues in aviation practice. We kindly ask all of our guests to please enter the hall and take your seats. For your information, we also provide simultaneous interpretation today, so please use the receivers as you did yesterday and turn to Channel 1 for Korean and Channel 2 for English. And to minimize any interruptions, we ask that you please take a moment now to check whether your mobile phone is turned off or on silent mode. Also, as part of the efforts to take preventative measures against the spread of COVID-19, we kindly ask you to please keep your masks on during the event inside the venue and to follow our staff's guidance and directions. Also, we have a live streaming website for those of you joining us online. So if you are joining us online, please turn to the CIET 2022 YouTube channel. Ladies and gentlemen, we will soon begin. We kindly ask you to please come inside the hall and take your seats. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us once again this morning. We have our fourth and final session of the SEAT 2022 ahead of us. So the fourth session will be current issues in aviation practice. And as you can see, we have our moderator and 4 speakers as well. I'd like to introduce to you our moderator for today. It is Professor Sanghoon from the Department of Urban Planning and Engineering, a visiting professor at Yonsei University. And he's also providing city authorities and construction, development, and transport-related companies with consulting related to digital transformation in particular. And also, his background includes a managing director of the Korea Agency for Infrastructure Technology Advancement, managing an important number of national R&D projects. With that, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to hand the floor over to Professor Lee.
예, 감사합니다. 방금 소개받은 이상훈입니다.
Yes, I'm Professor Lee Sanghoon that was just introduced, and I currently give lectures at the Department of Urban Planning Engineering at Yonsei University. And you might think, why am I here to be a moderator at a air cooperation conference? Well, there's a reason, because this SEAT was first started in 2004, but I was actually with the MOLIT at the time. And this was a conference that I actually started to organize, and it continues to today. And I feel great pride that I was a part of the beginning of this. So when I was with MOLIT, I worked on this a lot, and so that's why they chose me to be the moderator for this session, I believe. And we're going to talk about current issues in aviation practice today. That's the theme that we have for session 4. And this is going to be for an hour and a half, and I would try to keep the time as best possible. We have 4 speakers here today, and they will introduce themselves as they present, I'm sure, but let me briefly introduce them. First, it's Guillermo Federico Hoppe. He's the representative to ICAO of Costa Rica, and then Jinhang Nah, Director, Urban Air Mobility Team at MOLIT, and Yongmin. He's a principal researcher at the Korea Aerospace Research Institute in charge of the K-UAM GC program. And then Professor Yeon Myung from Hanseo University. He's very famous here in Korea. He was with many state organizations, and he's with the Department of Aerospace Industrial Engineering at Hanseo University. And so these are the 4 speakers for this session, so let's just get right into it. So let me ask the first speaker, Guillermo Federico Hoppe, to come up to the podium and give the first presentation.
Good morning. It is a great pleasure to be here. My name is Guillermo Federico Hoppe, and I am the representative of Costa Rica to the Council of ICAO. It is an honor to be here. The aviation leader of the future today. Who doesn't like to hear great stories? and even more to be involved in them. Let me tell you a brief but very interesting one in which you and I are involved, as well as many leaders who preceded us, courageous and visionary leaders to whom we owe a great deal for being here today, participating in this conference, many of us thousands of miles away from home. Such a story was that of Daedalus and Icarus, an ancient Greek myth that the Roman poet Ovid recorded. As the story goes, Daedalus, a mythical inventor, and his son Icarus were in captivity to King Minos. In an attempt to escape from prison, Daedalus did what he did best, to think outside the box. Daedalus carefully studied the movements of birds and designed a device to simulate them. And as a result, he created wings made of feathers and wax to escape from Crete. But Icarus ignored his father's warnings and flew too close to the sun. His wings melted, and he fell into the sea where he found his end. Ladies and gentlemen, the development of aviation was preceded by centuries of dreaming, study, speculation, and experimentation. In ancient times, it was thought that human flight would be possible by imitating the movement of birds' wings. And this desire to fly has been with mankind practically since its origins. From the earliest forms of aviation, such as kites, to the hypersonic flights. Kites were invented in Asia, but their precise origin can only be speculated. The oldest representation of a kite comes from a cave painting on the island of Muna, Indonesia, which has been dated to between 9,500 and 9,000 BC. In the 16th century, Leonardo da Vinci studied birds' flight and human anatomy to achieve a practical aircraft. Thus, with technological development, the attempts to materialize the dream of taking flight began. By the 18th century, humans began to experiment with machines capable of ascending using lighter-than-air gases. Experiments with hotter balloons quickly became popular, managing to rise in the air with the drawback of being unable to control them. This situation, however, was overcome with the emergence of airships with engines and through the use of rudders. Then came the gliders in 1903, when the Wright brothers flew their flyer on Kitty Hawk Hill in North Carolina, United States. A crucial human milestone that we celebrate today as the origins of aviation. From this date onwards, aeronautical development has maintained a continuous rhythm up to present day. In 1914, American pilot Tony Janus made the first commercial flight in history between the cities of St. Petersburg and Tampa in Florida, with only one passenger, Major Abraham Field of St. Petersburg. In the sequence of aviation leaders, we have to remember a courageous pilot who became the first woman to fly over the Atlantic in 1932, Amelia Earhart. Yes, Sylvia, I know you're happy with that image. Now let us talk a bit about technology. The use of it has freed mankind from exotic control processes while achieving undreamt of levels of maneuverability. One of these marvels is definitely the fly-by-wire system developed in the 1930s and introduced for the first time in a commercial aircraft in 1988 in the Airbus A320, designed by Bernard Ziegler. Undoubtedly, the aviation industry has surpassed all expectations, becoming the safest means of transportation in the world. In response to the need to transport more passengers and decongest airports, the Boeing 747 was born and made its first commercial flight in 1970, and was the first wide-body aircraft to revolutionize the market. But if we are talking about wonders, we have to jump to 1976, when British Airways and Air France launched the Concorde, commercial airliner for the London, Bahrain, and Paris, Rio de Janeiro routes. The world's fastest supersonic aircraft was manufactured by British Aircraft Corporation and Aerospace. As a result of the competition, the Airbus A380 was born and made its first commercial flight in 2007 with Singapore Airlines. The gigantic Airbus A380 was designed to surpass the Boeing 747 and mark the leadership of modern engineering. But technological advances mark new challenges in aviation. One of those is the vertiginous development of drones that have facilitated the work of many professionals in engineering, industry, agriculture, environment, and recreation. All this innovation is leading to the birth of unmanned aerial vehicles for passenger transport, challenging traditional aviation and the world. This acceleration caught us off guard not many years ago in terms of regulation. And I mentioned the specific case of Costa Rica, when less than 7 years ago, many companies and individuals started using drones for different purposes. The challenges were mainly due to insufficient resources, training, and the lack of an adequate and standardized regulatory system. Looking upward and forward, our flight plan must include checkpoints that include a worldwide standardized regulatory framework that guarantees safety and efficiency, adequate training and sufficient resources, and support through strategic public-private alliances in order not to slow down this expansion and not to lose business opportunities. As an aviation organization, leadership began in 1916, when the first Pan-American Aeronautical Conference was held in Santiago de Chile. In 1919, the International Air Traffic Association, IATA, was created. In 1944, at the invitation of the United States, 54 nations met in Chicago to establish a council called Provisional Organization of International Civil Aviation, which gave birth to the International Civil Aviation Organization. But the history is also full of unfortunate events. We cannot fail to mention the terrorist attack of September 11, 2001. This event forced ICAO to take measures with its member states to ensure safety and security. It was a before and after moment in the way we travel. Another landmark event was definitely the COVID-19 pandemic. After 2 difficult years, the global aviation industry realized its role in bringing nations together. People stopped traveling, airports and borders were closed, and thousands of families separated, making us reflect on what kind of leadership the aviation of the future should have, and whether it is a decision that should be made today. Aviation faces many challenges to get back on track in the short, medium, and long range in terms of efficiency, sustainability, innovation, technological advances, and passenger health safety. To achieve these, we need special leaders. When we talk about leaders, I must highlight the figure of Dr. Franklin Chan Diaz, a former Costa Rican astronaut noted for his extensive experience and vision, planning for the future and bringing to life innovative technology that challenges the limits of reality. With great thinkers and innovators like Franklin Chan challenging the impossible, it is easy to point out that we have leaders to guide us to success. Achieving goals in life requires leaders with the ability and willingness to lead men and women to a common purpose. Leaders with the character to inspire confidence, with the gift of good communication, a clear vision, a purpose in life, and leaders that do not skimp in the pursuit of excellence while inspiring others to resolve conflicts through teamwork. The future aviation leader develops their skills daily, strives for excellence, and is customer service oriented. Is a very critical self-evaluator of her work and performance. The future aviation leader must be a good project manager and exceptionally skillful in complex projects, knows how to apply all the tools, frameworks, strategies, and procedures to manage this complexity. Applies adaptive leadership and knows how to differentiate between a technical challenge and an adaptive one, which involves values, beliefs, habits, and several dimensions. The future aviation leader has initiative and is courageous, knows how to navigate uncertainty and change, drives innovation, and is tech savvy. In conclusion, what have we learned? Let me ask you a question. Are we facing a new normal? Or do we require different business models in our field? New challenges and business models imply greater complexity of execution, which in turn requires new leaders willing to embrace them. We have experienced a compression in the life cycle of products and services, which must be designed and developed faster. As a result of technological progress, among other things, there is an explosion of knowledge and access to information. So it is necessary to strengthen the exchange and experience within the organization and the group of professionals to improve the performance and outcome of the projects. Aviation requires competent and efficient leaders with professional knowledge, good judgment, and skills. But the one characteristic that will make all the difference is attitude. We must remember that the successful teams consist of motivated individuals who take pride in their work and are committed to the task and the sacrifice it represents. But above all, we must keep in mind that technology should never replace those characteristics that make us unique as human beings. The ability to be empathetic and to love. Let's take a leap forward to better skies. Let's become the aviation leaders of the future today. This is my invitation to everyone.
감사합니다. 호ppe 씨. 수고 많으셨습니다.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hoppe. So did you like the welcome dinner last night? So it's the next day after welcome dinner, and then I think that discussion is what we really need after such a wonderful welcome dinner. It was a really meaningful presentation, and I could think about so many things after listening to Mr. Hoppe's presentation, such as changes that we went through in the aviation field. And then technology is not all. Humans are more important, right? So we could look into the features of the leadership that we need in the past, in the present, and in the future. Thank you very much, Mr. Hoppe. So now we have participants full inside this room. So let me once again explain about how we are going to proceed the session 4. So we are going to have 4 presentations, and then as a moderator, after the presentation, I will ask 2 or 3 questions to each presenter. Some of the issues that you might be interested, and then I'll give my microphone to the floor so that we can invite some questions from the floor. So I believe that each speaker has about 15 or 20 minutes, right? But I will limit to 15 minutes. I warn you if you go over 15 minutes, okay? And then the next issue is UAM.
So the UAM policy of the Republic of Korea will be discussed in this next presentation. So Na Jinhang, Director of Urban Air Mobility Team at MOLIT, will give the presentation. Good morning, everyone. I'm from the Ministry of Land Infrastructure and Transport, Republic of Korea, with the Urban Air Mobility Team, and my name is Na Jinhang. Mr. Hoppe gave a very interesting presentation, I believe. Recently, the aviation industry, I think, has new challenges and opportunities, and one of those is UAM. And I'm going to talk about that, the Korean UAM policy. And I want to start with this picture. The reason I'm showing you this picture is because when we talk about advancement, technological advancement, a lot of people think this is for the private sector, not for the government to interfere with. But why then, still, is the Korean government so interested and active in intervention with UAM technology? Well, let me explain that to you. In 2017, Steve Jobs first introduced this smartphone to the world, and this iPhone, it changed the world. And I believe the UAM will also bring about this kind of change. Now, whether you have the latest iPhone 13 or Galaxy 22, but let's go back to 2007, when the iPhone was first born in 2007. Do you think we can still reap the same benefits? I don't think so. In 2007, we did not have 5G or LTE connection, and we did not have YouTube. So what I'm saying is that even if you had the handphone back then, this good handphone, the latest one, you did not have the ecosystem to be able to use it in 2007. And that's the same with UAM. This is a new innovation that is coming, but just by developing the UAM, the actual flight device itself, not useful. You need the ecosystem, you need the institutions, the infrastructure, and also the acceptability of the public. All of that industry ecosystem has to be built for the UAM to be able to change our lives. That's what I want to emphasize. That's why the Korean government is so interested in developing UAM infrastructure and the conditions to build this technology. Private sector alone cannot do this alone, that is. Private sector and public sector together have to build this. And so that's why we have Team Korea, UAM Team Korea, which is private sector and public organizations, academia, and industry. All together these parties come together to make UAM Team Korea. There was 37 institutions participating in the beginning. Now it's 47. And there's about 88 organizations in all, if you include the invitational organizations. And this is not really a government-led initiative, but it's the UAM Team Korea itself. All of these members are driving this. So with UAM Team Korea, what is UAM Team Korea doing for UAM? Well, in 2006, we made this roadmap, UAM roadmap, and it's in 4 phases. And in 2025, we want to commercialize UAM. This is the initial stage. And this is not thousands or hundreds of UAM. We believe that in the beginning, it's only going to be 1 or 2 routes, less than 10 actual UAMs. And if it's just for a few people, the government does not need to be involved, really. So this will later, of course, expand. But in the beginning, in the initial stage, it's going to be very expensive, and it's going to be very limited. But we don't want to limit it to that. Eventually, we want to build it into a transportation method that all people can benefit. So we think that in 2035, the growth stage, or the maturity stage really, that's when UAM ecosystem will be fully ready to commercialize it on a large scale. The cost will come down, and we believe that 1 kilometer will be about $1 to fly a UAM at that time. And that's the goal we're looking for. So by 2035, to generalize UAM transportation, but this is not something that just happens on its own. We have made 6 goals, really, or 6 strategies, you can call it. And this is basically for 2025 commercialization. That's where we want to focus first. Regulatory preparation for 2025 commercialization. And here, private sector and public sector cooperation is very important. And we have to also convince the public that this is a viable means of transportation. So overall, these elements we have to mix and match well together. And we are making UAM legislation to support all of this, regulations that is. Existing aviation regulations we have, but are we going to apply that as it is? We don't believe so. There's going to be limitations for applying it to UAM. So we want to bring about special provisions that can guide the UAM Act or UAM properly. So this is the 6 strategies, but this is for 2025 commercialization, more or less. But beyond that, we have to think about mass generalization, mass commercialization by 2035. And to do that, we need technology advancements. So that's why we have the K-UAM technology roadmap for that. This is more tailored to 2035. And to make this roadmap, to make it real, this is what we consider. UAM has to be all about mobility. And so if we want to do that, with technological advancements, people have to be able to use it efficiently. It has to have economy of scale. For instance, if it's too expensive, you cannot have it as a means of mobility. It's going to die away and nobody's going to use it. So we're making a technology roadmap. And in making this technology roadmap, one of the first priorities was to get an economy of scale, to make it affordable. So we're making simulations about the operation of the UAM to see if we can make it affordable. But let's say if it does not become affordable, we keep changing the scenario, the operation scenario, and we do iteration so that we can get operational feasibility. That's basically what we're doing. And based on the model that we get, the economically feasible model, we try to identify elements of technology that we need. And the government is going to support those elements of technology, you see, that we need. This is the scenario that we made. As you can see, in 2025, there's going to be only a very few number of vertiports. And it's about $3. 3,001 is about $3, let's say roughly. $3 per kilometer will be the economic value or price. And not many passengers, but if you see at the maturation stage, when it's mature, 2035, you can see that the price comes down quite significantly, and there's more number of passengers. This is the scenario that we built. At first, you need pilots, right? Of course, in the beginning, in 2025, and the cruising speed would be only about 150 kilometers and a flight range of 100 kilometers. But if we develop technology, we believe that by 2035, it will be autonomous, without pilots, that is, and the flight range would be about 300 kilometers, cruising speed 300 kilometers as well. And noise of the vehicle might be a little bit high in the beginning, but by 2035, it's going to be only the same noise as other vehicles on the road, we believe. So by this time, in 2035, we believe that UAM will be ready for mass deployment for the general public, that is. And so we're doing an R&D project right now. About 1.6 trillion won we're investing to make an R&D project to validate our target performance or performance targets. And this does not mean that we're going to meet all of our goals at once. It's going to be difficult. And like I said, the ecosystem is very important. So that's why we have the UAM ConOps. Based on this ConOps, we're going to build the ecosystem, and we need new stakeholders involved as well. This is the various stakeholders. But let's look at the ConOps, how we're planning it. It's a fixed corridor method. It's about 300 to 600 meters. There's a UAM corridor, a designated one that we believe UAMs will use. And so to make this reality, especially in aviation, it's not only technological development, but you need to also be able to do it in real-life scenarios, and you need this to try it out. And so that's why we're doing the Grand Challenge. We call this the Grand Challenge. We look at the limitations in safety or regulations, and we try to make this a viable technology. And so, yeah, so that's why we're doing the Grand Challenge. We got the scenario, and we want to verify it. So we're doing that through the Grand Challenge, but we have to meet the safety goals and regulational goals as well. And so this is a pilot program that we're doing, right? This after the Grand Challenge, and we verify and validate the possibility of UAM technology, then we want to do pilot programs. So many people say UAM is here in the future. It's the near future. We'll see it soon enough. So then what do we have to do right now? We have to really just prepare for it. That's what we have to do, and we have to make it happen. Like Mr. Hoppe said before, how to build the future together, well, that's up to us in the aviation industry and aviation sector. Collectively, we have to build our wisdom and strength together, and our imagination, our beliefs. Depending on our direction, it will be made. So not only Korea, but in the aviation sector as a whole, I hope that we can build a bright UAM future together that can benefit people and public all around the world. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Nah. That was a great presentation. The Korean government at MOLIT, they're thinking of this UAM strategy that we've just seen. They want to expand it and make it massively commercially available. Very total, complete presentation was given, but I remember most highlighted was that we need an ecosystem. The ecosystem for UAM needs to be built, and that's where the UAM roadmap and the technological roadmap is all made. And to validate the technology, they're doing a grand challenge right now for UAM. Thank you very much for that presentation. Okay, next, let's move on to Jun Yongmin. So, next presenter, please.
Good morning. I'm Yongmin Jun, Principal Researcher of K-UAM GC Program Office of Korea Aerospace Research Institute. Today I'm going to talk about the K-UAM GC program and its purpose. So the presenters before me have prepared a very amazing PowerPoints, but I'm an engineer, so please be reminded of that. First, let's look at the background. Just like a director explained before me, UAM is not just a technology, but now we plan to make it as one of the transportation means. So, of course, it is important to apply many different technologies, but at the same time, we have to make it really safe and secure. And we also need public acceptance and whether citizens are ready to accept it as a transportation means. So we need to secure the safety, ensure the safety and security, and we need to check the public acceptance. So this is the goal of GC. So we wish to evaluate, or we aim to evaluate the safety and capability of a UAM and analyze the gap under K environments to support building K-UAM regulatory framework and launching initial commercial operation in 2025. So that is why we have started to build an ecosystem where we can actually test the K-UAM, and we are also supporting all of the possibilities. So we have two phases, as you can see here. So we have first GC-1, which is to evaluate basic performance and reliability of a UAM ecosystem at an isolated area. So we are almost ready to operate this facility. So it is currently under construction. So from year 2023. Basic performance and reliability will be tested. And then, as I said, we have step-by-step progress, as you can see here, because it is a new technology, so we cannot actually apply this in the urban areas right away. So we first need to test in the rural area, and then after that, we cannot go into the urban core area directly, but before that, we need to first start with the suburban area and then move on to the urban core area. So the Ministry of Land Infrastructure and Transport will be the head of this program architecture, and Harry will work under there. And then we have UAM Team Korea, so UTK is now supporting us right beside us with KIAST. And then we have K-UAM GC-1 participants. So we have 1, 2, 3 big pillars. So first one is UAM air operators, vehicle manufacturers, and the second is UAM traffic management service providers, and third is vertiport operators. And then, so those who are ready for commercializing such a program will be under the feasibility test team. But if some are not ready, then they will join some other teams to actually test the technology together. So let me tell you about the main points of the GC-1 scope. So when it comes to the first pillar, first of all, we will need to check the main task of the UAO and OEM. And as you can see, our institute will take the previously accumulated data to come up with the preliminary plan And we will analyze the characteristics of each participant to check some priority areas of the participant. So in the grand challenge level, if some have fully developed certain technologies, then we can maybe lessen the test burden on some of the operators or the testers. So our institute and the KIAST and KOCA the Korea Office of Civil Aviation, will work together to determine, after consultation, about the final mission task for each participant. So we will prepare so that we can actually help the airworthiness of Korea. And then this is the second main task of UATMSP, the Basic Air Traffic Management Service. So this is about, as you can see, air approval for the flight plan and airspace management and conformance monitoring. So three big pillars, as you can see. And then if I may give you more explanation about the diagram. So there are like corridors which are fixed inside the urban area, and we will need to check the path and then the width and etc. But actually, these numbers or the standards are not fixed or not determined yet. So therefore, we will we'll make some standards based on which we can check the pre-flight deconflict or 4D traffic management or 4D trajectory against approved flight plans or flight path deviation, other issue functions, and etc. And this is the third one, the main task of a VPO. So we will check three things. First, we will evaluate VPO activities in K-UAM, CONOPS 1.0. So there are some roles that should be played by the vertical players. So we will check the roles and processes through GC-1 scope. And second one is to show preliminary rules for vertiport. And then the third one is to evaluate the vertiport design and operation guide, because we need to decide whether we need to decide the scope and the size of the vertiport, as well as a facility design. So vertiport design and operation guide are important to make decisions on all of the progresses and processes. So during the GC-1 scope, we'll be able to find the conditions that we need to operate the UAM. And we will compare with the conventional environment, and we need to find some ways to reasonably narrow the gap between the traditional and new technologies. So GC started and it is now in operation. So we actually announced the K-UAM Grand Challenge phase in February this year. And RFI was released in February, and now proposal submission has been closed by May this year. So we are currently collaborating and talking with those institutions which have submitted the proposals to this project. And then by the end of this year, we will sign the official K-UAM GC-1 officially. And then we will start dry run of a K-UAM GC-1 infrastructure from April next year. And we will develop test and freeze GC-1 detailed test plans for each participant from summer, like July next year. And then we will launch K-UAM GC-1 tests for participants by July or August next year. So this is the current status of GC. So this is a summary of GC1 proposal submission. So 6 consortiums and 6 companies apply for the program. And as I said, the grand challenge are now taking place in 3 big areas, and consortiums are now proposed by these companies that you can see on the slide. And there are 6 individual companies that are intending to participate in one of the 3 areas. So you can see that there are big companies of Korea that have joined the consortium. And one of the characteristics of a UAM is that we will need to use the commercial telecom service available in that country. And you can see that big 3 telco companies of Korea are now participating in the consortiums. That means that we can actively test such new technologies in Korea. So that was the background of K-UAM as well as the current status. And now I'm going to explain about some technologies. So this is the first infrastructure for GC-1 plan. So we need like GI operation system, CNS and GSF. And then actually the feasibility test will take place for about 2 months only. So we will need a lot of equipment and facilities, but I think it will be a great waste if each and one of the participants bring their own equipment. So that is why the teleco or the surveillance-related equipment are now being prepared by our institute, and then some of the equipment will be shared among participants. So this is the test scenario and cases for GC-1 planning. So as I'm showing you here, we have GC scenario and nominal procedure, off-nominal procedure, and some development simulation and etc. And then the scenarios that were proposed by the participants were even more innovative than our previous traditional proposals. So we have taken them as reference to build up these plans. And as I said before, the area is located in the rural area of Korea. And then the test airspace has about 20 kilometers as a radius. And we try to avoid the densely populated area. So we have divided the flight zone into 1, 2, and 3. So the participants will choose one of the flight zones according to their conditions. So this is a bigger picture showing the GC-1 airspace. So we have a flight test infrastructure, and then the center, and then the test drive will be done making a kind of circular movement. So 450-meter altitude plus minus, like 300 to 600-meter altitude will be used for the test flight. And as you can see, the yellow and blue lines, the routes will be used for the test. So just like Director Nah mentioned, the big challenge of the Grand Challenge is not like challenge among the participants, but challenge against the conventional or traditional technology, I may say. So we try to utilize GC altogether. And in GC, it is actually a collaboration among Coca, Kiast, and Curry to find out gaps and to build a new framework and big data to commercialize UAM in K environment. And we do not limit the possibility to domestic, but we want to expand our collaboration abroad. So we are currently preparing possible collaboration with NASA, AAM, and NC. So we hope that we will develop the big data to actually globally standardize this UAM technology for the world. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Jun. That was a really great explanation about the K-UAM GC program. So you're on the first stage. I think on the left axis there were operators and manufacturers, and then the second axis the traffic service providers, and then on the third phase vertiport, like the infrastructure providers. I think operators need to play even bigger roles, isn't it? Because the aircraft, like the technology and etc., well, they are all necessary for operation. So we need the feedback more and more from the operation part. So rather than having like clear parallel, I think operators will need to play bigger roles in the program. So I hope you will take that into consideration. Thank you very much.
Okay, and the next one is about certification, UAM certification, and this is also a very important topic. So Professor Yeon Myung will talk about this actually, UAM certification and strategy for commercialization. Yes, I'm from Hanseo University. I was just introduced. I'm Professor Yeon Myung, and I've been with the public organizations for about 20 years researching transportation. And now I've been with the Korea Institute of Aviation Safety Technology, and I've been looking at the manufacturing side a lot. Speakers before me talked about the ecosystem of the aviation industry and why ecosystem is important. And so I'm going to talk about that too as well, but also about UAM certification in manufacturing, operation, and MRO as well, because certification is important. If you want to make good performance, high performance aircraft, you have to get authority. The aviation authority has to certify it. If you don't get that certification, no matter how good you make it, it cannot fly. So it's different from automobiles. Aircraft, you need certification to allow it to fly. And so we say that in 2025 UAM will be commercialized, but we'll have to see what kind of scenario it will be when we get there, what kind of UAM will be flying and how it will be certified and so forth. That's still a task ahead. So anyway, I thank MOLIT for giving me this opportunity to talk about this topic of certification. And there's a lot of speakers, participants from overseas, and I'm sure you're also curious about the status of UAM development in Korea, and it's an honor for me to be able to present that a little bit to you today. So largely, what I'm going to talk about to you, let's say it's three things. What is aircraft certification? Is that what I'll talk about? And then in the USA or in the EU, UAM certification is underway, and so I'm going to talk about that a little bit. And then certification plans for Korea. I'll talk about that, and then at the end, I'll close with my closing remarks. So let's start with this slide. This is the ecosystem of the aviation industry, the ecosystem of UAM. Let's look at that. First, aircraft versus UAM. Aircraft in UAM is a little bit different. In traditional aircraft, we have fixed wing, rotor wing, but UAM, we have multicopters, tilt rotors, or combined or hybrid kind of models, that is. And engine is internal combustion gas turbine, but now in UAM, it's electric motor, power as well, from jet aircraft fuel to electricity we're changing. It's different. Manufacturers are also different. Traditionally, we have Boeing, Airbus manufacturers for aircraft, but UAM, we see a lot of startups. And a lot of motor companies are also making UAM, like Hyundai Motor Company or Toyota as well, or Mercedes-Benz. GM also is in UAM. And of course, aircraft manufacturers as well. And the operation range is different too. Of course, aircraft conventionally is for intermediate long range at high altitudes, whereas UAM is middle or short range at low altitudes. Now, I want to really emphasize certification though. I'll get to that soon enough, but first, we have to ensure the safety of UAM, right? Let's say you design it safely, you make it safely, and you do all of that well, and you do MRO activities and repairs and maintenance repairs and do all of that safely. But and all of that will ensure safe airspace. And then we have vertiports or other air traffic management or air routes or rules. All of that, we say we're gonna do it safely, right? But how do you verify that? So what I'm saying is that there's these elements and new UAM elements, and how to confirm the safety of it. Well, that's what certification comes in. That's why we need certification. I've changed my presentation, and I forgot to put it up. Do you see this? Can we put it up? Can you put up? Do you know what this is? This is I did a presentation, and you cannot get this? Can you zoom in on this? What do you think this is? Can you zoom in? Mr. Hoppe, do you know what this is, Mr. Hoppe? It's the 737 in Boeing. 737. It's a cup holder. It's a cup holder in the 737. How much do you think it costs to make this in Korea? Mr. Hoppe, do you know? Can you make this in your country? Well, $50, he says. Well, okay. In Korea, I had a conversation with somebody, and they say 3,000 to 2,000 won. So it's about $2 or $3 to make this. It's a plastic. So, or even if it's $10, let's say, to make this, this is all imported. Some carrier imports this. How much do you think they import it at? $200. So it's 20 times or 40 times the cost of when we can make it here. We're importing this at a very expensive price because FAA certified it. That's the only reason that it's so expensive. This part we're importing because it's FAA certified. This is all about certification. That's why certification is so important. Without certification, your aircraft cannot fly. And economically, if you don't get it certified, you have to buy something very expensively if you don't have certification. That's what I'm trying to emphasize here. So let's talk about it, certification. So what is aircraft certification? This is my definition of aircraft certification. The process of technically determining the suitability of safety requirements in all processes of design, production, and operation to ensure the navigation safety of the aircraft. So we're looking at airworthiness. And it's a process of determining an aircraft's airworthiness. So if you do not get certified for airworthiness, you cannot fly that aircraft, like I mentioned earlier. And these are the different types of certification. So the red one on top is for aircraft, and from design, you have to get the type certification in the design stage. And at the manufacturing stage, you need product certification. And then you have the flight tests and so forth to get the airworthiness certification. So that's one type of certification. And then you get the AOC. And then through maintenance, MRO, you get AMO. And then TSOA process as well for parts. Well, these are the different certifications that you can get for aircraft. And so in the different types of certification, we have this type certification in the design stage. So for aircraft or engines or even propellers, you ensure that they meet the standards for airworthiness. Also, there's environmental standards that it has to meet. And the process of checking all of that is certification. And this is done by authorities, the authorities. Let's say the authorities have set forth these standards and regulations for airworthiness and environment. If you meet that, then you can get this type certification, right? So also for aircraft parts as well, there's certifications like TSOA and PMA. And through that kind of certification as well, we need that. And this is what type certification is. And in the elements of type certification, the most important things is, first of all, the legal basis for this. And in the aviation law, we have that, all the legal basis for certification. So then if you have the legal foundation, then you have the procedures, specific procedures, and that's all in Part 21. So you can find all of this in Part 21. And then there's the standards, like airworthiness standard or different standards for certification. You can find that in Part 23 or Part 25, 27, or 29. Part 23 is about rotary wing, small rotary. 25 is large rotary. 27, oh, excuse me, fixed wing. I'm sorry, I was confused. So it's fixed wing, 23, and then large fixed wing, 25. 27 is small rotary wing, and 29 is large rotary wing. So you can see all of those different standards for design safety there. And then how to do the substantiation and validation. Well, they have those standards as well, doing actual tests or doing simulations, for instance. Those procedures are all established, you see, to do certification. So that's what we do for aircraft. We do aircraft certification like that. But what about UAM then? UAM certification, there's nothing really standardized in the countries yet. But USA and EU, let's say, are most advanced and in the forefront right now of UAM certification. But they're different. They have differences. USA applies existing regulations as much as possible, and they have special categories or special conditions that they apply as well for UAM. That's the approach they're taking. And so they use Part 23 mainly for fixed wing, for ones with wings, and without wing UAM, they use Part 27 mostly. And in the EU, they also have a special category for VTOL, vertical takeoff landing, VTOL. And so they have new regulations for the special condition VTOL, vertical takeoff and landing. So if you look at the United States, Joby Aviation is currently in the certification process. So Joby Aviation is getting FAA certification, and this is based on Part 23, the certification process. Of course, there are special categories that they have to comply with as well. And Beta Technology is also the same. It's for cargo mostly right now, and they are also in the process of FAA certification. So Joby Aviation and Alia, that's from Beta Technology. These UAM are currently getting certified. And the EU is doing this as well. Volocopter in the EU. There was, in Incheon Airport as well, there was a validation project with this as well. But the two-seater, the Velocity, that is. Currently with that, certification process is ongoing. Not only that, but Volodrone for cargo, or Velocity, that's the two-seater, and Volo Connect, which is the four-seater, all of that is currently in the certification process. So that's what's happening in those countries. But what about Korea? We talked about the grand challenge, and from 2025, Molit told us, Mr. Na told us, that we're going to fly it, and we're going to have it commercialized. But we don't have the aircraft. Then what do? We import that aircraft and fly it. That's what we're doing. Of course, at CARI, we're also preparing here in Korea our own aircraft, indigenous one, but it's going to take time, I think, to develop and certify. But we have to get these aircraft quickly certified for us to have local manufacturers make UAM and have Korean-made indigenous UAM fly our skies. So what are we doing then? So for UAM certification, there are currently a lot of policy support and research in progress. Like I said, at KIAST, currently, the work is taking place. And I think that we have already collected a lot of opinions, and we've made many considerations together with stakeholders. And you can look at, according to the Aviation Safety Act in Korea, we have the Part 23 and Part 25 for fixed wing, Part 27, 29 for rotary wings, and then we have a new category, VTOL Special Class. These considerations are currently being made on how to classify and apply regulations. So when we go to airworthiness standards, once again, we apply airworthiness standards for Part 23 or 27 for different types of UAM. This consideration is currently being made. And so related legislation has to be revised to accommodate. And you can see here, earlier I showed you this, but standard substantiation is the key issue, actually, and that's where we're placing the most research and consideration right now. And so quickly, we talked about 1.6 trillion won R&D investment by the government, and the government will support, but this kind of high-tech technology, we need to have continuous study. So academia, industry, and institutions together must continuously research with government support, and experts need to get involved so that we can cooperate globally to get certification technology that we need. And through this, we have to understand the new technology better. That's first and foremost, and then identify the safety factors, and then do the actual certification and assure safety, and then commercialize it or industrialize it, that is. That's what we need to do. That's the process. And so this is my closing remarks. So ultimately what I want to say is that traditionally Airbus and Boeing made aircrafts, and they had the market and they shared the market together. But now, when the UAM era comes, then like I said, there's a lot of startups that are preparing for UAM, like startup companies or motor companies, even communication service providers. They're also in this field as well. Okay, I'm at 14 minutes, so I have to finish up now. So that's what we're doing. So ultimately, aircraft certification is not about prohibiting flight, but it's regulating the business. And this is to revitalize the aviation industry so it can strive and grow further. So through certifications, we can industrialize and export our domestic aviation products and get it socially accepted. That's what we need with UAM. We need to improve its safety and reliability to have it socially accepted. And so once we get that, then the Korea UAM industry can settle early, and we can gain international competitiveness in this field. So that's what we have to do. So we have to really bring up the level of certification for us. That's what I wanted to emphasize. And with that, I'd like to conclude my presentation. Thank you very much. Yes, thank you very much, Professor Kim. I said 15 minutes, and I knew that you would get lengthy a little bit, so that's why I kind of gave you a signal. That was it. That was all. Okay. So But thank you very much for your detailed presentation, especially about certification. And you introduced the USA and EU certification processes and showed us the differences. Thank you very much for that. Now, we've had a total of 4 presenters in this session, so let's go right into the Q&A session. I want to ask Mr. Hoppe right away.
So you have talked about very important topics during your presentation. First, the technological innovation. So how it is accepted by the society. I think that's really important perspective as well. Technological innovation and existing ecosystem may have some conflicts in between. So what do you think about this?
Very interesting question, and I touched upon the fact that we are undergoing and experiencing on a constant basis this explosion of knowledge and the access to the information. It's pretty much instantaneous nowadays. So one of the greatest challenges we have, not as aviators or as businessmen that are part of the aviation ecosystem, but as mankind, as humankind, is how to deal with technology and not lose what makes us different as humans, and that is the heart. So we should always think about creating good for everyone. So in every action we do, we have to think not particularly only for ourselves or to a particular state or for the benefit of a particular organization or operator, but for the benefit of the whole world, of the whole ecosystem. How is my work going to benefit aviation, particularly? So it's a very thin line, definitely, and it's already challenging as it is, seeing aircraft flying without a crew. That is a challenge, definitely, especially for us aviators. You know, it's very interesting, but we have to find the balance.
감사합니다. 호ppe 씨.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hoppe. That's a really important issue, and I'm sure that we need to continuously think about this. Well, I'm not in a position to answer this, but can I share one case? Well, I have been involved in smart city project a lot, especially R&D project. And then I developed data hub platform. And after that, COVID pandemic broke out, and we were thinking of what we could do with that. And then in order to do that, we started to work on this, the test platform that we can use based on this. And then we had many webinars, but actually that created some privacy issues. Privacy issue is always raised in Western world, right? But actually, this IT system provides connectivity. And then when we started to operate this testing system, such as like epidemiologic testing system, the thing that we are all interconnected, we're all shared by people. So we are interdependent relations. So if somebody is sick, then I can be sick too, right? So we came to know about this. So people now accept that they disclose their information because of this relationship among people. And now I want to ask a question to Mr. Nah.
So thank you for your presentation on government policy, and also the other speakers as well. But we use mobility or transportation a lot with in relation to UAM. So the terminology, can I ask about that? Yes, you asked a great question. UAM. We want to differentiate it from traditional aircraft transportation because usually aircraft we use it for long distance business trips or so forth, but UAM would be in the urban environment. It's in our everyday lives now. So it's going to be a very close form of cooperation in the city. I'm not saying that aircraft is not, but something that we use every day is what UAM is. That's where the focus is. That's why we try to differentiate it from traditional aircraft. That's why we used to use the word transportation a lot. But now the government is trying to build the term mobility. That's what we want to focus on. And there's there was a water taxi in the past at Korea. It kind of failed, and that's disappointing. But in Korea, in our capital of Seoul, there's a big river, the Han River, and we plan to use the Han River as a transportation method. You know, we wanted to make water taxis on the Han River, and so that could alleviate some traffic congestion. We felt it would be very successful. But this water taxi, it was not accessible to people because you had to go to a certain area to take the water taxi, and that area was not accessible, the platform. So UAM might be the same. UAM, we need these platforms or vertiports, right, at these positions. And so that has to be, we call it MARS, Mobility as a Service, MAS, but we want to focus it like that, UAM, so that it can be really in the lives of the people very closely. So in the UAM roadmap, that's why I showed you, we're also trying to think about transfers with other types of public transportation, you see. So, and in our verification project, the Grand Challenge, we're also very much welcoming these platform providers like for autonomous vehicles or other transportation methods, how to connect UAM as a mobility service. That's what we're trying to do. We're looking at policy support in that direction. Thank you very much. Okay, next, Professor Jun Yong-min.
So I believe that this is the new mobility and new transformation, and I think there can be some competition. So the autonomous vehicle is really actively promoted by the Korean government and even within the urban area as well. And then we may compete against like underground logistics as well. But there are like R&D projects that use subway logistics or underground logistics, etc. So what do you think about this? Well, that's a really practical question. So we see those projects now going on in smart city, and the EV or autonomous vehicle are currently under development. And then you may expect some competition with them, and yes, that is correct. And then as the water taxi actually failed, will we really go into the UAM direction or not? I think yes. And then the most important thing is safety. And the UAM is not a replacement, but it's actually something that we can supplement. So people may not choose a UAM because they don't think that's safe or because that's not cheap. So if UAM expands, in order to make UAM expand, first we have to make people believe that UAM is safe. And then I talk about this with the Hyundai Motors CEO. We need safety first. And then the second one is affordability. So there should be some economic value that we can gain. For example, $1 per kilometer, then it will be economically feasible. And the autonomous vehicle is 2D, but UAM is 3D. So, you know, the urban area is really complex, but this is 3D, so UAM can help us to resolve this issue, like complexity issue in the urban area. So I think that is why it is feasible. Thank you.
Yeah, safety, that is the most important. I agree. But there's also other considerations that you have to do, like noise, for instance, or environmental issues. This is also very important. Bird strike is also something that's of concern, especially in Europe. So these are also all important considerations we need to make. Oh, also, Dr. Chun, Gohong, you mentioned, you're doing the first stage of the validation project in Gohong, but the second stage or the second phase you're going to have as well, right? What do you do for that? Like, what kind of plans or visions do you have there? Yes, the Grand Challenge Phase 1, like I mentioned, it's about safety and reliability. That's what we're trying to verify. So that's why we have chosen this remote location of Gohong. There's an aircraft performance test center there, but actual UAM is going to be used in the urban environment. So in the second phase, we want to test it out in the urban environment. And the location is not set yet, but near the metropolitan capital area. UAM, you've heard that from the airport into the city, to the inner city, that would be the most viable route, a lot of people say in the beginning. So we also have that idea as well. But if it starts from the airport, then there's ATC, ATM. You need to harmonize with that. So what kind of UAM aircraft characteristics we will have, we don't know that yet. There's uncertainty still. So in GC2, we're looking at the Seoul metropolitan area, maybe somewhere at an airport. That's where we'll test it out. And from then, we will develop it further. That's the plan that we have at the moment. Okay, thank you. I want to ask more questions, but I think I should stop because if I keep asking, the floor will not have an opportunity to ask. So I want to ask the floor now to raise your hand if you have any questions, and we'll bring you a microphone. Tell us who you are and who you want to ask the question to. Okay, in the table in the middle, there's somebody who raised their hands right off the bat.
Hello, I am Song Jae-hwan from the Transportation Corporation. So Mr. Kim talked about the importance of the certification, so I really agree with you. And then I want to talk about the certification for the qualification of the personnel who are in charge. So I want to ask a question to Mr. Nah and Professor Kim. So UAM test drive will start from 2025 in the urban area, and then it will first start as manned, but later it will be operated as unmanned, as it will be remotely operated. But I think, in my opinion, in some level, there should be some personnel who will actually operate this, who have qualification and or license. So I want to know about this issue. So how will you certify the qualification of the pilots who will remotely operate this, for example? So let me give you answer to that question. So that's really a good question. So even though we have good systems, of course, humans are the ones who will operate them, right? So, well, we are considering many different options because if we think that pilots will be on there all the time, then we can just train and educate pilots. But ultimately, when we consider the economic topics, we are going into the autonomous autonomous method, right? So for those pilots who will join the UAM from the early stage, will need to have the licenses for the conventional aircraft and who get additional training for UAM. So that's one of our ideas. And then for the unmanned UAM, ALPAS is now considered in ICAO. So ICAO has considered this topic a lot earlier than us. So we are currently following the discussion over ALPAS that is now taking place in ICAO. but we are not going to foster or nurture or train the new personnel from the beginning. We're not doing that.
So can we get another question? Okay. I'm Jinhang Lee from the Hong Kong University, and thank you very much for your presentations. It was really great. Mr. Nah, though, you said you're making a UAM legislation. I want to ask about that. So, legislation, making it before the technology is developed is very difficult to speculate and make the law first. So, the UAM legislation, is it possible without knowing the technology for sure yet? Yes, very insightful as well. This question is a very good question, and we thought about that a lot too. So in the beginning, in the UAM Act, there's aircraft regulations. We wanted to put all of that in, actually, but there were so many uncertainties then if we do it that way. So the UAM Act, we kind of narrowed the scope, and so we're going two ways now for two directions. First of all, the UAM players, we want to look at that. Who's needed to build the ecosystem, these UAM players? We want to at least define who the UAM players are. And so that's what the industry also calls for. They want to alleviate these uncertainties because if there are uncertainties, it's hard to enter this industry or this field. So they want the uncertainties to be cleared up. So vertiport operators or all of these players or the PSU, the provider of the services of UAM, these PSU, they want to understand that. So that's where we want to define first. And then the second one is these special provisions. For instance, in the beginning, like you mentioned, it's true, there's uncertainties that we don't know yet. So through these special provisions, we want to make that so that when we actually operate it and there are new developments, we want to make regulations based on those issues, right? That's what we want to do, rationalize the act as we go and build it later further. So we don't want to specifically make an act right now that is hard-fixed. We want to build a community. Through the expert committee, we will get suggestions of what provisions we can make first, and then we give special provisions on that or grace periods on that, and then we can make the fixed frame of the legislation later. That's what we're planning. Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Nah, for that explanation. Let's go to the next question now.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lee. My name is El-Hefni. I'm the representative of Egypt at the ICAO Council. In fact, I'm an aviator like my colleague, Mr. Guillermo, and I think there will be no problem concerning the certification issues and this technology. But the only problem that I always think about is the weather problem. You know, in urban areas, there is unexpected weather problem. Like you have mentioned, the wildlife, birds, but I'm concerning about the weather issue. During my flight here and during my experience, I always heard about people injured during flight, cabin crew injured during flight. And these people are injured, although there is a pilot inside the airplane, and sometimes he is a little bit late in forecasting the turbulence or in his decision. So I'm not sure how this because in the third presentation, I realized that they put the weather management issue. So this is an issue of perceivedness from an aviation point of view.
So I believe that this is a really reasonable question. So we are thinking in two ways. So first, I show you the UAM project, schedule. So in the early stage, the operation days are really few because we believe that considering the weather condition in Korea, we will be able to operate in just a few days. So we just limited the number of the operation days, and then we will keep checking, and then we will expand. But we are trying hard to overcome that challenge with the technology, but actually the micro weather prediction forecast is not easy. But we completed the early R&D of this technology inside our project, and how we will expand to the overall metropolitan area and how we can respond in an appropriate manner is also what we are thinking right now. Well, I want to ask the host whether we can ask 5 more minutes because we will have 30 minutes break, right? So can we use 5 minutes out of the 30-minute break? Thank you very much. We have one more question.
Yes, from Incheon International Airport Corporation, I'm Mr. Lee, and I want to ask the question to Mr. Nah from MOLIT. And we're related organizations, so it's hard for me to ask maybe. It could be a tricky question, but it's just personally I want to ask this question, not officially. So in the it's about legislation, but later I know it will be resolved. But in terms of accident, if an accident occurs, if a safety accident occurs, let's say, or a safety issue occurs, how to do that? Really, regarding insurance or indemnification, how will the government, is there anything by the government right now that's in discussion about that, and who will be responsible? And vertiport, when you make vertiports, I know that there's a lot of discussion about vertiports, but if you build vertiports outside, let's say passengers, they arrive, and then let's say to go to Seoul Station, it's about 50 minutes right now from the airport to Seoul Station, but it's very quick and efficient, let's say. That's what you need. But the vertiport, you need it on airside at the airport, but if you think about cost and so forth, it's not easy to have a vertiport on airside and build it like that. So vertiport, having it on the airside, is there any discussions around that? How far have you come in the discussions about that? And so the vertiport, KAC or Incheon International Airport Corporation, are we going to be responsible for making it? Well, that's the scenario, I believe. But then in our corporation, we need to amend or revise our foundation laws, the articles of establishment. So all of that, it's very difficult issues for the airport corporation. I want to know what the government's plans are around that. So there's two questions here about insurance issues for safety accidents, and this one already, we're going to reflect this in the UAM Act. Of course, we have these special provisions and grace periods, and this is an act that can be revised later, but basically, for this operation, you need to be insured. The operator needs to be insured. And the UAM Team Korea, there's a lot of organizations that have affiliates that are insurance companies. So we're actually in discussions with these insurance companies how to insure this operation. And vertiport, there's going to be, you're talking about not in the urban setting, but at the airport side, where to install the vertiport. That's your question, I know. So to talk about that, the UAM route, it's very important to decide the route of the UAM. So it's very difficult to go into airside. That's what a lot of experts said, to put it on the airside. So what we're thinking is we're starting easy and then going to more difficult issues. That's what we think. So in phase 2 of the Grand Challenge, we're going to bring it to the urban setting, right? We're going to a semi-urban area and then later to a more congested area. That's what we're thinking. But in phase 3, after Grand Challenge Phase 2, we're going to Phase 3. That's when we're going to bring it into the airport setting. And so how we're going to harmonize it with current air traffic and traffic at the airport, that's what we're going to do then. So that's Phase 3 issue. And regarding vertiport, who is going to be in charge of constructing it and managing it? Well, the Incheon International Airport Corporation, or the KSC, I'm sorry to say this to the airport corporations, but vertiport is not going to be limited in number like airports. It's going to be many. Vertiports will be many, scattered around the places. So there could be airport corporations that do this, but other private sector companies will also be in charge of making vertiports. That's the way our legislation will evolve. Okay, thank you very much. Lastly, let's just take one more question.
Hello, I'm from Wonju Halla University. I'm Professor Min Jang-gi. I have 2 questions. First, to Mr. Nah. So you talk about the personnel certification, and then about the extension of the license of the pilot. So aviation personnel have 4 licenses. One is and you can see that there are like pilot and air traffic controller and maintenance operators and etc. So can air traffic controller expand their scope so that they can cover the UAM scope as well? Or will you have like air traffic controllers for the conventional aircraft and UAM separately? Like, do you have any plan for that? And another question is to Professor Chun. So it is currently manned technology, but in the drone technology, I believe that some companies like Amazon are using drone to transport goods to their customers. And then when you develop this technology and apply to the society, there can be some issues, right? So you can see that the residential condition in the U.S. and in Korea are different. And in the U.S., because there are many just like separate houses, so they can just drop off the packages or the products or whatever in the front yard. But in Korea, we are more dense, and then we have many apartments, right? So, and this is like COVID-19 era. So we have many delivery services developed, right? But can you be brief, please? So when we consider such conditions, I believe that we need to consider the social issues as well. About the first question, I mentioned the human factors, right? So I just mentioned pilots, so you ask questions for other personnel. So for the ATMs, I think if they even manage the UAM, the workload would be too heavy. So I think this is well agreed across the world. So we believe the Korean government have set up the new center for the UATM, so which is separate from the traditional ATM. Maybe some ATMs will just move to the UATM, but from the long-term perspective, I think making it autonomous will be really important. So we are preparing in that way. But the ATM and the UAM and drone domains can be integrated in some channels. So it is now being prepared at the same time.
So about social issues, yes, it is a very sensitive issue, I know. And through the Grand Challenge, one of the biggest reasons we're doing this Grand Challenge is so that we can have the public accept this technology. 2 years ago in Yeouido, we had a volocopter. We flew that. And a lot of people gave us various opinions. If the UAM comes into the city, there's two things that we're concerned about. Noise, first of all, the noise level. Of course, noise level that you can hear is a difficult issue, but also what you can see, the noise that's visible. Like, for instance, motor vehicle noise or helicopter noise. If you look at a helicopter in person, you don't really it's not that distasteful, but a UAM, will they accept it like that as well? You know, that's what we're thinking. Will they accept the noise level of a UAM when they see it actually fly? And privacy as well, the vertiport. When we have vertiports at locations, there could be houses or office buildings or apartments nearby. And in the vertical landing and takeoff, I mean, cruising is not an issue, but when it's vertically lifting off or landing, there's privacy issues that we might have to overcome. So those are two concerns in the urban setting that we're trying to look at through the Grand Challenge. Okay, thank you very much. I know that there's more questions, but because of time restraints, we have to stop here. And I want to really see UAMs fly in the sky soon, myself first. But riding one, I'm a little bit hesitant, I think, because there's a lot of reasons. You have to accept and take the views of people like me and take my opinions and make this institution or systems well. That's my last aspiration as I close this session. So with this, I'd like to conclude this session. Thank you very much.
Moderator and our For speakers for the great session. Thank you to our audience for the participation as well as all the comments and questions. Thank you very much. This concludes our fourth session, ladies and gentlemen. And now we will break shortly for coffee as well as resetting our stage for the closing ceremony. So please enjoy the break until 11:30 a.m. and I will see you at the closing. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please? We will soon begin our closing ceremony. We kindly ask all of our guests to please enter the hall and take your seats. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, we will have the closing ceremony in just a few minutes. We kindly ask you to please come inside the hall and take your seats. And to minimize all interruptions, we kindly ask you to please check whether your mobile phones are turned to silent mode or turned off. And as part of the efforts to take preventative measures against the spread of COVID-19 virus, we ask you to please keep your masks on unless you are eating inside the venue. And to keep the government's social distancing policy, we also have our online streaming channel. Please go to the CIAT 2022 YouTube channel for the online streaming version. Ladies and gentlemen, we will soon begin our closing ceremony. We kindly ask you to please come inside the hall and take your seats. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, another word of announcement, please. We will begin our closing ceremony in just a few minutes. We kindly ask you to please enter the hall and take your seats. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, we will begin our closing ceremony in just a few minutes. We kindly ask you to please enter the hall and take your seats. Thank you very much. Morning, sir. Good. Hope you have a lovely tour tomorrow. You're not going. Oh. Oh, see. That will be a trip in itself. Yes, yes. Oh, I see. How was it? Oh. Well, I'm glad that you actually got to see some part of Korea at least. Exactly. Tonight's your night then. Ladies and gentlemen, we will soon begin our closing ceremony. We kindly ask you to please take your seats. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, we will now begin our closing ceremony. Please take your seats. Thank you very much. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for attending the closing ceremony. The past 2 days of SEAT 2022 is now over, and we now have a festive closing ceremony to attend. So thank you once again for your participation. The last finale of our conference is the closing ceremony, and for us, the closing remarks and an overview of the conference, allow me to invite Honorable Mr. Kim Yong-Seog, the Deputy Minister for Aviation Policy at the Ministry of Land, Infrastructure and Transport of the Republic of Korea, for his remarks. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome him with a big round of applause.
존경하는 데오닷 인다르 가야나 공공사업부 장관님,
Honorable Mr. Deodat Indar, Minister of Public Works of Guyana, Director Generals of the Civil Aviation Authorities of Chad, Ghana, Uganda, and Namibia, representatives of the UAE, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Costa Rica, Nigeria, and Italy to ICAO, and distinguished guests. Did you enjoy your stay in Korea? For 2 days, the aviation industry, academia, and governments engaged in heated discussions and presentations about air transport, restarting global aviation, policies for responding to new normal and new tech, decarbonization and sustainable aviation environment, and current issues in aviation practice with seasoned experts under the theme of Leap Forward to Better Skies, Aviation Recovery and Restoration. In particular, Ambassador Yeon Kim, Ambassador for Climate Change, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, moderated the special ESG session in which airlines, energy businesses, and airport corporations gave presentations about ESG management, net zero strategies, and climate change response. Discussions at the session also introduced Korea's decarbonization effort, which is in line with ICAO's long-term aspirational goal. I believe the discussions we had at this conference will contribute to establishing sustainable policies that will enhance benefits for all countries and passengers. I'd like to thank all presenters and panelists for engaging in discussions and giving detailed presentations. Also, Korea will not only So I hope that this conference on international air transport cooperation will provide strong momentum for the international aviation community to march forward in the post-pandemic era, and I wish that this conference would serve as a foundation for further cooperation and development of international air transport. So I would like to conclude the conference here, and after this, we will have a luncheon prepared here at the Grand Ballroom. I hope that you all enjoy that and continue your joyous discussions with one another. And so please have a good remaining stay in Korea, and I hope you good travels back home, and I hope to see you again soon. Thank you.
Thank you once again, Deputy Minister Kim, for your kind remarks, your closing comments of the conference as well. And I believe that we have been through a long series of events looking at ESG, aviation, as well as UAM this morning. So I'm sure that a lot of our participants are very hungry. So next, we will proceed on to the luncheon, ladies and gentlemen. And if you remain in your seats, we will serve lunch right to your seats. So please do enjoy the lunch that we have prepared. And lastly, as a last comment, we truly hope that you have enjoyed the last 2 days with us, and furthermore, the last week with us as well. And we hope that the fruitful outcomes of the SEAT 2022 will be the stepping stones to leap to a better future and to leap to better skies. So until we meet again, ladies and gentlemen, please do stay safe and healthy. And here I will say goodbye. Thank you very much.